you just joining, go ahead if you want to leave a comment in the chat. Let us know where you're coming from tonight. We hope that you are warm and well and safe. Our hearts definitely go out to everyone over in California with the fires, as well as the first responders who are working so diligently. My parents just moved from that area, so they know a lot of the people that are being affected at this time. So we hope that you're all well and safe tonight. I'm very grateful to have you here. I'm grateful for all those that are participating in our gratitude challenge. I know that a lot of you are, and what a powerful difference that is making for each of us, right?
Heather, just so you know that it's going on Facebook now. Just
okay.
So you know.
Yep, well, that sounds so good. So this is our masterclass, our Restoration Equations Foundation, and this is part 3 of our restoration equation, where we're going deeper into our third part of the equation, which is meeting needs. And before I jump into that, I just want to let you know that this work really matters. And the fact that you're here tonight says a lot about you. I literally just got an email, and Mark doesn't even know this yet because I just got it, of a daughter of one of our clients. She's 8 years old. Okay. And she was saying, thank you for helping to save my family. It was scary for me and sad for me to hear my parents talk about maybe not being married anymore. And I'm so glad that they're together now. And that's what this is all about. So I just honor you guys. You know, the impact that these relationships have, they expand beyond what we could ever even know. Like, each relationship we have touches so many others' lives, even generations to come. And so what you're doing tonight, it matters. It matters on a big level, on a big scale. So I'm grateful to each of you for coming. Now, who this is for? This is for those who are wanting to know if their marriage can be saved. Maybe things have gotten a little rocky, a little tense, or maybe they've gotten really tense, really rocky. Maybe one of you is pushing for divorce, separation. It's also for those who want to know if they can save or improve their marriage, but maybe your spouse isn't willing or not wanting to work on it with you. And this is for anyone who wants to have connection and love, rebuild trust and openness, create more passion and have security, and yes, even some fun back in your marriage. So this is what we're going to talk about in the next roughly like 40 minutes here live together. We're going to talk about some really common myths and mistakes, and you'll identify what the wrong ways are in restoring your marriage. Like I said, these are very common. So don't beat yourself up if you've fallen into one of these, but we do want to make sure that we're doing it the right way. We're going to show you results, how to get quickly out of the painful loop you've been stuck in and actually start seeing some change. That's what it's all about, right? Seeing some real change, some real results. And hope, how to get your spouse from the point where they have one foot out the door to back in your arms again. And then direction. It's so important to know exactly what you must do to restore your marriage and what fatal mistakes to avoid. That direction, that clarity is going to be some powerful aha moments for you. So anytime you hear yourself, your internal voice, or, you know, that core part of you saying, wow, you know, like, oh, wow, I didn't even know that. Or wow, yeah, I definitely need to work on that. Pay attention to that, because that's the direction that you need to move forward for yourself personally in your marriage. And then time, how to save time, energy, and effort so you can restore your marriage fast without wasting years in therapy. All right, so does this sound like you? Do you lie in bed at night? And I've been here, okay? That uncomfortable tension. It's like you could almost cut it with a knife, right? And that feeling of just dread, arguments running through your head, wondering what you're going to do, how you're going to solve these things, even wondering why you can't seem to have a normal conversation anymore. Do you feel like the more you reach out to work on the marriage, the more they push away? And does this sound like you? Do you dread the thought of what divorce would mean to you, to your precious children, and the rest of your family? Do you feel stuck, uncertain of how to fix problems that keep coming back or get worse, no matter how hard you try to fix them? Do you feel like you have no idea how to get your spouse back, but you are hungry to learn and do what it takes? If so, then you are in the right place. So what is the real problem here? That's the real question. Many people, they have no idea what the real problem is. And they focus so much on all the wrong things, and they never realize what actually needs to be changed. We're going to go into that deeper here in just a few minutes. But Mark Johnston, I'm Heather Choate, we're international marriage coaches, and we have seen commonalities in successful couples by coaching them and studying hundreds of thousands of couples all over the world, right? So Mark and I, we know what makes couples tick. We know what makes them come together. We know what pulls them apart. And there are common traits that couples everywhere have that bring success and happiness. And there are also certain actions and traits that almost universally spell disaster. Now, I know that a lot of you submitted in some questions tonight about the specific challenges in your relationships. And we're going to go through some of those. We're talking about affairs, spouse pushing for divorce, stonewalling, giving the silent treatment. All of these things might look very different, and they are different. But however, Mark and I have uncovered that there are very common traits that apply to couples everywhere. So we're going to talk about those tonight. So, question for you, and I'd love to see this put in the chat and in the comments over on Facebook, if you're watching live over there. But what do you think is the number one most common mistake couples make when restoring a marriage? Give that a ponder. Be brave. Put in your answer. What do you think the number one most common mistake couples make when restoring a marriage? Go ahead and put your answers in, and we're going to circle back to that and answer this question in a little while, but I'm going to give you some time to answer that. All right. Now, I love analogies. I love pictures. So we're going to imagine that our marriages are like a tree. Okay. From above the ground, you see the trunk, the branches, the leaves, and the fruit. Okay. These little balls are fruit. I don't know what they are, but they look delicious. So imagine that some of the fruit on our tree is whole and ripe and delicious, but some of the fruit over time has become rotten, cankered, and full of worms. My children and I were recently helping a neighbor with her apples. She likes to freeze them over the winter. And so we were helping her cut up some of her apples, and a lot of them had worms in them. I was cutting one open, and I chopped one in half, and my daughters were delighted. They thought it was hilarious, and they were so excited to see this worm chopped in half. So let's imagine that that's what's going on in our relationship, okay? So what do we do? Well, as humans, right, we're all human. It's very natural for us to focus on those ugly, smelly, rotten fruit, even the decapitated worms, right? I don't know if you can decapitate a worm, but definitely we split it in half. So it was really, really gruesome to me, but hilarious to them. All right. So we focus on those things so much that it's often difficult to see the good pieces. So what do the rotten pieces of fruit look like in our marriage? And these are some of the ones that you sent in, and the ones that Mark and I talk to people about every single day. So we have arguments, poor communication, stonewalling, silent treatment, igniting, right? Where things kind of seem to escalate, getting into cycles of really poor communication. We also see money challenges, right? Couples disagreeing about money, the stress that money can put on a relationship. We have sex, lack of intimacy, differences in opinion on what needs to be happening there, right? We have affairs. We have parenting challenges, and we have it when the spouse is checked out, pushing for divorce or separation. All right. So what do most people do when they see this kind of fruit on their tree? This kind of fruit in their marriage? I hope you're following my silly analogy here, but let's talk about it. Number one, most people think about going to counseling. That's kind of the go-to, right? Next is pastor, church help, support groups, books, going out there, looking at the self-help aisle, Google, YouTube. So all of these things, we turn to these sources in an effort to fix the rotten fruit, right? To fix the arguments, fix the money problems, sex, affairs, parenting, checked out spouse, any other rotten fruit that there might be. All of these things are done in an effort to fix these things, right? let me know. You know what I'm talking about, right? And what happens when people do their very best to fix these problems? The problems don't go away. Mark is going to explain exactly why in a little while. The bottom line is that these things, the arguments, communication problems, affairs, parenting, those are all, they aren't the real problems. So they're not the real problems. They are symptoms of the real problem. So what we don't see from standing on the ground is that the roots of the tree have become corrupted and diseased. So this is our imaginary root that has been corrupted, going up and spreading disease throughout the tree. So the number one mistake that couples make is they're focusing on the symptoms. And when you focus on the symptoms, the problems don't really go away. It just becomes masked. And ultimately, even if you solved your concerns with any of these issues, another probably would crop up somewhere else to take its place. Mark and I have seen this time and time again. We've coached couples that have been in counseling for 20 plus years, and they might resolve one issue like money, but then another one crops up like parenting. So what is really going on there? And why have they not been able to fully resolve all of their problems? They haven't been looking at the root, right? The core issues behind what was going on there were never resolved. So that brings us to what we want to do instead. And that brings us here to our first part of a restoration equation. And I'm going to turn it over here to Mark, who's going to explain exactly what we need to do instead.
Okay, well, yeah, not the first part, but yeah, one of the parts of the restoration equation. It's what Heather is getting at here is that a lot of times the deeper needs, the deeper the root issues, it's often about meeting needs. Needs like feeling secure in a relationship, and certain needs for like feeling some connection and love. And when we look at a lot of the problems that Heather was just talking about, having disagreements in parenting, or problems with money, or, problems not feeling loved by their partner, you might be able to pick off some of those fruits and eliminate, the problems with, say, sex. But if the need there is really a need to feel some connection and love, and let's say you start having more sex, as a solution, that might do some things, but if you're not actually addressing that need for connection, that need for belonging, things like that, you might, like Heather was saying, you might see other problems cropping up. And this is where we really start digging down deep in order to really meet some needs in the relationship. So at the root of all this, like I said, like Heather's analogy, at the root of all this, everyone has some basic needs. And if you're going to solve issues, if you're really, really going to solve problems, you need to solve it at their roots. Like I was saying, there's certain basic needs and I love using this theory here as a way to just really identify where to start with all these sort of problems. Because when we can get down to the basic needs in a relationship, we can probably see a lot of connections. So we have these needs, like needs for security and certainty and safety, knowing that your partner is going to be there, that, that they're not going to leave you, that even if there are problems, you have a very secure relationship. Or, needs for some variety, or sometimes it's described as uncertainty. People like having a little bit of challenge, a little bit of fun. They want to have some spontaneity in their relationship. For me personally, I love a lot of variety. Like my wife gets frustrated sometimes because I don't like eating the same thing twice at the same restaurant. And I love going to all sorts of different places. And sometimes she just wants something a little bit comforting. And so there's a little bit of a push and pull there in that need. Or we have needs for connection and love, to have a sense that we belong together, that it just feels right to be with someone. I heard it described one time, when you've been in a relationship for a long time, it's almost like speaking its own language when you're together. And when you come apart, it feels terrible because don't have anyone to speak that language with anymore. It's that kind of need right there. Or needs for feeling valued or significant. A lot of times when this is a problem, I hear people complaining about feeling respected, feeling like they have been heard, like they might complain about not feeling like they have a voice or like their opinion matters. We also have needs for growth. Everyone loves to feel like they're making some progress, whether that's in a relationship, whether that's in a career, whether that's themselves as a person. And when things feel stagnant, it starts to eat away at you. It starts to feel draining. My wife and I can remember several years ago where we kind of hit a plateau and we had to really address it because it just felt terrible not to be growing. And then, a needs for contribution. Feel like what you do actually matters, that you're contributing to something greater than yourself. So when we look at all these different needs, all these needs together, and we find out what's missing, just like the picture here, when we find out that one of these roots is really gone wrong, it becomes much easier to figure out what we need to do. And, just to pull in some of the other parts of the equation, this is why the equation all fits together. The other parts are taking time for some understanding, restoring hope in the relationship, and then meeting needs. That understanding is really, really important if we're going to identify what kind of roots are going wrong. So, going back to this whole illustration here, when these needs aren't met, there are certain problems that happen. Let's take for an example here. I remember one of my old clients, so for privacy purposes, we'll call him Mike. And I remember when Mike came to us, he told us all about the arguments his wife and he would have, how it would get to the point where they were calling each other names. His wife would start swearing at him, really putting him down. There'd be times when he was describing to me the things that she was saying to him, like questioning his manhood and saying he's not much of a person. Really, really terrible things to say. He tried working on his own response because he would get upset at these things. And I can understand that, as if you're being put down, having a really hard challenge, reacting in a calm manner. So he tried working on his anger, and that helped a little bit. But his wife kept on with the insults. We could have simply treated this as a respect issue, teaching about setting boundaries. We could have talked about this as a communication issue. But there was a reason why his wife was so upset. And when I started talking with him, we found out, okay, Mike's wife had very little trust for him. And so any time that anything felt unsteady, uncertain, unsafe, a situation that reminded her of that lack of trust, she would fly off the handle. In other words, her needs for security and safety were severely drained. So, this is all because of things that have happened in the past. We don't need to get into that. But when we were able to create some plans, when we were able to get everyone on the same page for expectations, so there wasn't any big surprises, when we were able to do other things that provided security and certainty, able to provide safety, many of the arguments just disappeared. The root was taken care of. And so, like I said, if we had focused in on the arguments, nothing would have happened. That sense of safety would not have been fixed. It wouldn't have been provided as well. But when we understood what the root issue was, the problems just disappeared. So when needs aren't met, people tend to scramble. And we see this in a lot of relationship issues. When their needs are met, it's just feeling so draining that people look they have to have these needs met. So when sometimes what they do is they take it in a healthy manner, they take care of the problems, or they might even, you know, look for some self-help, they might look for other things, but they look for a solution. And other times when something is presented that could possibly offer a solution, even if it's something that's unhealthy, people will gravitate towards those things. That's why we see problems with affairs. That's why we, you know, see sex problems, that, you know, as people feel less connected. That's why we see arguments over parenting, as people feel like their opinion isn't heard and it doesn't matter. This is why we see money trouble, as people are not feeling safe and secure in situations. This is also why they have feelings of neglect when, you know, that connection and that belonging are not nurtured. They all stem from some basic needs not being met. And so people look desperately for that fix. It's all about needs. So what do you do now? Like, if you have a checked out spouse, if you're having these parenting arguments, if you're having this affairs and poor communication and all of that, well, you know, one part of this equation is you provide what's needed. The principle applies here in all relationships, dysfunctional or healthy. And the degree to which a relationship feels fulfilling is the degree to which needs are met. I'll give an example in my own marriage here. And this brings in some other, you know, other theories and stuff here. I know a lot of people are familiar with love languages, which I think is a wonderful idea. It's a great way to figure out how to meet a specific need for connection and belonging. But I remember, this was many years ago. This is, you know, I was going to graduate school. My wife and I, we had just had our, I think, third child at the time. I was working full time. My wife was, had a part-time job as well. We were very busy with very young kids, and we were feeling very stretched thin. And I remember coming to my wife and I coming together at some point, and we said, you know what, not feeling that connected right now. I'm a little concerned about it. And it was good that we were able to identify that and talk about it. But what was interesting was here was a situation where neither one of us was feeling some connection and felt really draining. But when we started talking, we started realizing that each of us were doing things to try and connect with the other person. It's just we weren't speaking that love language. We weren't speaking the right language to each other. What we ended up doing is we ended up just pointing out every single little thing that we were doing when it was something positive. So we figured out through that interaction that my wife's love language was acts of service. And so, you know, when I was taking out the trash or something, you know, I'd say, you know, I'm doing this because I really care for you. And, you know, I want to make sure that you don't have to do this for yourself. Or she might even ask me, and she said, you know, I would like you to take out the trash. It would mean a lot to me, and it would show me that you care. And so I was happy to do that thing. And just by being very open with something like that, it better provided for that need for connection. And things feel great today, you know, because of some simple shifts there.
Mark, I'm going to jump in here if that's all right.
Yeah.
So one of the things that we often see is that we assume we know what our spouse needs, correct?
Yes.
And in that assumption, especially, I gave this an example in the email I sent out to you all just a little while ago. We often see, especially men, come in with kind of the white knight syndrome, trying to fix everything. And because they assume what their spouse needs, they can run themselves, and women too, but we see, I don't know, I've talked to a lot of men recently that are doing this. They've run themselves into the ground, working hard and not getting any result. And they come to us and they're like, you know, I'm cooking the dinner, and now I'm cleaning up after the dinner, and now I'm doing the laundry, and I'm trying to help her out, and all of these things, which would be great if their wife had the same need as Mark's, which would be service, right? That would make her feel connected. That would make her feel like she's significant. That would give her security, right? But if that's not your spouse's primary emotional need here, then you're going to just exhaust yourself. And so that's why it's so crucial that you find out what theirs is. And the example that I gave of the man that was becoming Mr. Mom, and he was cleaning and cooking and fixing the house and doing all of these things, what she really needed was someone to ask her how her day was and to sit down and listen to her. And that was it. You know, she just wanted that moment of connection. But the more he was out there busy doing other things, the less connected she felt. So he thought he was doing the right things, but it was just creating more and more of a gap between them. So
it's almost like there's different pieces to this puzzle, almost like there's like an equation or something. Yeah. So yeah, exactly. This is what we're talking about here is, you know, you need some understanding, you know, part of our restoration equation, you need some understanding. And if your husband or wife is really far gone, you need to be able to restore some hope. And, you know, once you can have those things in place, it's so much easier to fulfill those needs in the relationship because you actually know what to do. And because your spouse is on board, because they have hope that things could be different, it all fits together very well.
Yes, it does. And I'm just going to go over real quick to Regina's question. She said, my husband just told me this morning that the thing holding him back from reconciliation is that he still thinks that any change is temporary, even after 8 months. How do I affirm to him that it's not? So Regina, right here, you've been working hard for 8 months and he's still holding on to the fear that these changes are temporary. And you want to show him that it's not. Perfectly normal and natural. Right here, this piece of the equation, you know, this shows us you've worked through the understanding, you've been working to meet his needs. Now it's doing this consistently, right? Meeting these needs consistently. That is what is going to help restore that hope.
Well, yeah, I think that principle right there is much more connected to the second part of the equation in restoring hope. And there's a whole list of things, you know, lots of things that can be done to build up hope. You know, we did just put out a training this month on restoring hope. You know, and just we also released some videos in the previous weeks this month, just kind of giving a broad overview of that principle. But you know, just to kind of reiterate something like that, it's when you know there isn't really that security that things are going to continue to go well, you do need a plan. You need to have some sort of common goal together, like making sure that things are good in the long run. And you need to have an idea on how you're going to get there. You need to have, if you want to provide more hope, you need to help him understand just how important this is for you to make sure that this happens, that you guys go down these paths to get this goal. And then as obstacles get in the way, you need to figure out some ways to get around them. Like I said, we do have some videos in the video section of the Thriving Marriage group. We did just talk about some of these principles earlier in the month.
Very good. All right.
So
we're here. Yep.
the big question, I know, and I can see it in the chat, like here, you know, Mark is saying, how do you identify the root issues yourself? Or basically the question right here, okay, how do you know? What does your spouse need? You know, and if we keep going, you know, this all connects here. You know, which core need is not being met? These are all great questions. And next one here, what are they hoping to benefit by pulling away or leaving? That question right there is really important. You know, I know a lot of people who are listening to this have a spouse that's pulling away, that's starting to check out. There is something there that they were looking for. And these questions, well, quite honestly, it's going to be different for every couple. Next slide there. So, going back to the plant analogy that Heather was talking about earlier, you know, every couple is just going to be a little bit different. You know, if we apply the same principles, you know, in this analogy here, to making an oak healthy as a, you know, as a sunflower, it's not really going to work out. You know, the different plants, they need different amounts of sunlight, nutrients, the soil. You know, honestly, I'm not much of a plant person here, so you know, it's the same thing with your marriage. You need different levels of care and specific ingredients to make it thrive. One of the things that I see so often, we do get a fair amount of people coming from other programs, and when I start talking to people, they'll say, okay, well, so and so told me that I need to send at least one text message a day, and you know, try to do one phone, and they'll give like almost like a specific formula, and I just have to shake my head, thinking, well, okay, maybe in some circumstances, but everyone's different. And the thing is, it's crucial to get some, especially if you're having trouble, to get guidance from an expert, to know exactly what those different things, you know, get some feedback here and figure out what different things are needed here. It's also important that you apply them in the right order. You know, in the example that I was giving earlier with the man who had a very angry wife, you know, if we had gone in there and really tried to work on building up some connection and work on, you know, being close and cuddly and all that, it would have blown up in his face. And once again, I have to shake my head sometimes at some of the advice that I hear other people giving, just because, yeah, certain things are good, but the timing has to be right. Just like in the plant analogy here, you know, if you took, you know, 30 gallons of water, it'd be great for a fully grown oak, but it would completely drown that the seedling. So you want to know how much of each ingredient to apply and when. I know for me, I mean, there are times when I'm running my group calls with clients. So, you know, in the course of working with people, I usually run these group calls 3 times a week. And it's this great service. Everyone is able to get a lot of information from them. But, you know, there's sometimes I have to point out that the same actions that I'm suggesting to one person don't necessarily apply to others, even if their situation seems similar. You know, one couple that's dealing with an affair, you might want to do different things depending on where you're at. So Heather's going to go ahead and finish this up here, and you can go on to the next slide there. That's fine.
Good.
You got ahead of yourself a little bit.
Click happy over here.
That's fine.
All right. So if you're like many people, at this point, you might take this information and you're like, okay, I've got it. I need to solve root issues. I can't focus on the symptoms. I recognize that the help that we've been getting has been focusing on the symptoms and that I need to know what to do. But I think I've got it. It's easy. I can figure it out. I just needed a little nudge. Like, you know what to do now, right? That brings us to our next most common myth and mistake, which is a do-it-yourself type of approach to solving marriage problems on your own. And the, you know, bottom line is that your way, it just hasn't been working. Most people do not know how to solve their problems. Like, I have no idea how to solve a car problem or a mechanical problem. If I did, then it wouldn't be a problem for me, right? Just like this. If you knew how to solve your problems, then you wouldn't have problems anymore. And it's okay that we have problems. It's okay that we don't know everything. I remember Mark and I were coaching a dairy farmer, and we were laughing and joking about this because his wife was like, you know, we were trying to do this for so long on our own. And then he was like, yeah, but we were trying to do it and we didn't have an expert. And that's exactly what Mark and Heather are. They're experts. They know exactly what they're doing and how to solve this. Now, I'm an expert at milking cows. And then Mark was laughing because he's like, yeah, I have no idea how to milk a cow. Mark and I, we're not dairy farmers, but it is so crucial that you go to who knows how to solve those problems and not try to figure it out on your own, right? So oftentimes we compare ourselves to other couples and we try to do what they did. And that's kind of like planting like Irish moss by the sunflowers. And what happens, right? It gets completely fried because, you know, Like the sunflower needs a ton of sunlight, the Irish moss barely needs any at all. And so if you try to apply that same thing, it's not going to work. Sometimes we hear advice like shower them in compliments and appreciation, give them 10 hugs a day, send them all these text messages like Mark was saying. And instead of applying like a teaspoon of that, they dump 30 gallons on it and then they drown their marriage, right? Then they wonder why their spouse feels smothered. It's great advice. However, it needs to be put into the right, proper context for you in your relationship. Let me know if that makes sense. Hopefully that's a big aha for some of you. So wasted time is the number one cause of separation and divorce. We have said it time and time again that most marriages can and should be saved. And the saddest thing is that most people have the best intentions with all of these things. But the best intentions will lead to minimal results if they aren't coupled with the right knowledge and the application. So remember, guys, it's all about getting exactly the right information in the right order to get the results that you want. And if you're anything like our clients, then you know that your marriage is too important to mess around with, and that time is too valuable to waste trying to just figure it out, right? Those that succeed in restoring their marriages and have their spouse actually wanting to be with them, they don't waste time, and they make sure to get all the pieces of the restoration equation in the right order, which is exactly why Mark and I have put these trainings together for you. And again, that time is just going to create a bigger and wider gap between you and your spouse. So time is not on your side if your spouse is pulling away or pushing for divorce, and you need to take action quickly to move it in the right direction again. And I love Tina. Oh my goodness, she's amazing. But working with her, we helped her discover that her husband, he had a high need for growth. So if you go back, visualize the plant, right, with all the different roots and the different needs, his need was for growth. And she wasn't providing that in their marriage before working with us. She got into some postpartum depression and just kind of sunk into a kind of a dark hole in her own life. And that prevented her from providing those exciting and growing experiences for him. And that led him to be checked out. She says here in her own words, she wasn't sure if it was possible, right? He was only hanging on for the kids. She wanted to give it the best chance though. So what we did was, he became checked out. He was despondent. He was less and less willing to meet her needs. And it's a vicious cycle, right? When you get a cold shoulder from your spouse or they don't meet your need, then you're much less likely to want to meet their needs next time they come around, right? And then it just continues and continues and continues in that vicious cycle. She got the right help though, and learned what to do in the right order to meet his needs. And what happens when someone meets our needs so well? So you go to them and you've got, one of those emotional needs, and they meet that need. You just gravitate to them, right? We appreciate them. We want to be around them. We want to meet their needs in turn as well. And that is exactly what happened with Tina and her husband. And it's wonderful to see they're doing better than ever now. She says right here, I learned how to meet his needs, and it's been so amazing. He's loving to me now. And for anyone else out there wondering, I know it is possible to save your marriage on your own, and it's worth it. Here's another one. This Alan Hendricks, he had been in one of our clients that had been in therapy and counseling for years and years and years and years. And they were constantly told that communication was their problem. And like he says here, that's all they ever worked on, right? They're working on the symptom. They're working on that piece of rotten fruit. And they were given communication tactics and communication practices and like sit down and have this great conversation, right? But they never really understood what was causing the problem in the marriage. I hear a toilet flushing.
No, that I didn't have myself muted. There's a loud car.
Oh,
we have a bunch of snow outside, and I don't know how someone's revving their engine out there. But anyways,
that's hilarious.
Really
Okay. All right. What he came to understand, all you have tonight was that was just a symptom. Those communication problems were just a symptom, and the real issue was much deeper. They wouldn't have solved it on their own But now that they have, it's like things become easy when you solve things at their roots. It's not easy to do, but it's like once you finally get there, things become just so beautiful, and that like that magnet, they're just drawn to you, right? So back to our restoration equation here. I'm going to turn over to Mark to kind of bring it all together. This is the wrong slide. I realized we put the understanding one here instead of
that's fine. I know what we're trying to say. I'll explain it. So yeah, like we've discussed in previous classes, I mean, this is all part of an equation. You know, meeting needs is just one part. It's showing the part for understanding there. I mean, you can't really meet needs though if the situation isn't well understood. And if the situation is especially dire, it's also unlikely that your spouse will even accept you trying to meet their needs if they don't have hope that things could be better. And, like I said before, if you don't have that understanding, this is why we have this equation. Each of the parts are needed. And when you're missing any of the parts, it doesn't work. If we just focused on being, like if you just went and said, okay, if I said my wife, she needs me to, just come up close and be cuddly with her, in my example from earlier, if I had done that, nothing would have really changed. I needed to take time to understand her. The situation wasn't that dire, so we didn't need to restore hope in that situation because we already had hope. But, in situations where hope is lost, you also need to take time to give some assurances and to really come up with a plan, make everything feel safe, help your spouse understand why things are going to be different. But it all comes together when we, really dive in deep into each of these. It all comes together, and quite frequently we can restore a relationship.
All right. Thank you, Mark. So today we promised that we'd give you a couple of things, right? That clarity, knowing if your marriage can be saved or if it's too far gone, and what those common myths are and mistakes that we often see, how to get quickly out of the painful loop you've been stuck in and actually start seeing some change. So you can be like that family whose sweet daughter just emailed me and was like thanking me for helping them save their family and save her parents' marriage, right? We want to get you there for sure. And then hope, how to get your spouse from the point where they have one foot out the door to back in your arms again. That direction. What aha moment did you have? What stood out to you so that you know exactly what you must do to restore your marriage and what fatal mistakes to avoid, including trying to do it all on your own, right? And then time, how to save time, energy, and effort so you can start restoring your marriage fast without wasting years in therapy. We want to get you there quickly. So as always, my dear friend, you have a choice. We all have the ability to choose for ourselves. You can apply this restoration equation and start restoring your marriage today, or you can choose not to, right? But we want to see you there with the love of your life again, restoring trust, feeling secure in your relationship. And that, no matter what happens, you and your love, you can see things through. You can become like the rock in the storm that is welded together and is willing to face anything together. You can live with peace in your heart, knowing that no matter what, you gave your marriage the very best possible, and you became a better person because of it. So Mark and I and our team, we've set aside some time in the next week to speak to you personally about how you can apply the restoration equation to the unique circumstances in your marriage. Because I'm sure at this point you have some questions, including one from Mike here. If they don't communicate with you, how can you meet their needs? That's an excellent question, and we can guide you on exactly how to do that. There are solutions, there are opportunities that you can take and that we can show you how to optimize so that you can really start to reconnect, to restore that hope, build a bridge there, and then you can start to meet those needs and move to a complete marriage restoration. So bottom line, guys, are you ready to take your marriage restoration to the next level? In this call that we do, it's a completely free call. We will see if you qualify for our Express Relationship Restoration Coaching Program. That's where you work with Mark and I one-on-one. We go deep, and just like that expert doctor that I was able to meet with, we find out exactly what the root issues are in your marriage. You don't have to second guess. We will be able to identify exactly what it is and show you what you must do, like watering that plant, how much water to give it. We don't want to drown it. We don't want to starve it, or, we want to give it exactly what it needs so that it can thrive. We can pick up the pieces and build your marriage better and stronger than ever before. We see it happen every single day, and it is absolutely beautiful. Now, this is not for everyone. We have more people reaching out to us than we can help. So there's a couple things we want you to know: who this is for and who it's not for. We need to make sure you're the right fit for the program. So we look for those that are committed. You must be absolutely committed to saving your marriage and be willing to go first without waiting for your spouse to get on board. Invested. You must put forth the time, energy, and money to save your marriage and your family, right? It's taking you time, energy, and money to get to the point where you are. And it's going to take the same to get the other side going, right? And coachable. You must be willing to do what it takes to save your marriage. So if you feel like that's you, then this is absolutely for you. And I invite you to go over to highthrivecoaching.com/apply, and you can schedule a time right there that we can talk with you about that. So remember, life is short and time is precious. Who do you want to be at the end of the day? What kind of things do you want to look back on your life without any regrets, right? The pain of regret weighs pounds, right? The pain of taking action weighs ounces in comparison. So think about who you really want to be, where you want your life to go, and know that you're not alone and there are absolutely solutions. Mark, we thank you for your time tonight. We thank everyone for joining us. Again, here is that link. We appreciate you guys, and we will talk to you soon.